All right, so we finally have something very exciting going on in the small cap market. If you were trading around last July, then you might remember this stock HKD, a small Chinese company that went from like 20 bucks per share to $2,500 per share. We are now seeing another Chinese small cap, which just today alone went from around 23 bucks to a high of $150 in just a single day. And I don't believe it's done. So in this video, we're going to be breaking down my analysis of this play and what I'm looking for going into the next few days, where I'm going to be planning entries and how I'm going to be planning to just ride the thing for as long as I can. So it's going to be a nice short video. If you enjoy it, do me a favor, give me a like. If you want to see future videos like this, make sure to subscribe and enjoy. All right, what's up everyone? To the Trade Buddy recap webinar, and we finally have something that is actually exciting to look at. I mean, we haven't seen a stock move like this probably ever since HKD back in late July. So a very impressive move so far, and I do think that it definitely has some potential to do a type of multi-day move. So we're going to kind of talk about why it moved today. We're going to look at the catalyst for it, and all the kind of stuff, behind the scenes. And also look at some technical things and what I will be watching for going into tomorrow. And then also comparing it to obviously HKD. If you're not familiar with HKD, this was a stock that ran back in like July or so, late July. And it went from like, 19, 18 bucks. Over the next few days, it ran as high as $2,500 per share. So obviously that's a very type of black swan outlier move. I don't think HUDI can do the same. Who knows? Anything is possible. But it definitely has some similarities in how they're trading so far. So number one, we can just kind of start off with the basics. So let's just look at the basic information about HUDI. I am pretty sure it's a Chinese-based company. Even though here it says they're based in the US, I don't think that's accurate, because the news today says that they have announced a strategic plan in entering a new energy industry, and they have initiated new discussions with a Sichuan local government to invest and construct new energy and battery storage project. So yeah, that's in China. I'm not sure why their profile says US. That's kind of weird. I guess they export to the US, but I'm pretty sure they're based in China. So yeah, that was the news catalyst. So they're doing a kind of pivot in their company, new energy industry. As far as the float goes, you can see here the shares outstanding says it's about 13.2 million shares, and the float is only around 3.2 million. So very low float, and it did some interesting things. So the time that I saw this play, it was after this morning dip. I didn't even have this show up on any scanners. It was too high priced. But I do want to point out one thing that, was very interesting about that morning dip. One of the main indicators I use as a level of support and resistance, as you guys know, is the daily 200 moving average. So if we put that up, and once again, you have to mark off where it is on the daily chart. So here you can see going into today, it was right at around 25.53. So I'm just going to mark that off with a nice solid red line so we can see it intraday. I'm going to take it away. And you can see that, in the morning, let me just delete this. In the morning, it had that kind of sharp, pullback from 38, dropped down, and then it tested right at that daily 200. So the reason that we use the daily 200, the reason why we think it's a good indicator is because it's pretty well known that large investors, banks, hedge funds like to use this area just as a price to size into positions. So it's interesting to see that, once this just had that sell-off, volume really increased into that daily 200 and it bounced right off it. So, if I was watching this in the morning and I had this on my watch list or whatever, and I knew about this company, that would have been like the best place to buy into it. But obviously, like, yes, you can say hindsight's 20/20. I wasn't watching it at that point. And then you can see from there, it went on this crazy breakout. It broke out over the previous morning high, over 40 bucks, and then it just halted like crazy. Now, like I said, it was halting like crazy. You can see on the 1 minute chart, this thing had many halts. Even in the morning prior to the pullback down to the daily 200, I mean, you can see there's a halt just right here. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 10 halts before it started to kind of stabilize a bit. But then even in the afternoon, once it broke out even higher, you can see there's even more halts. So a very actively halted stock. The reason for that is, number one, it's a very low float stock. And if there's a very low float stock that's very high in demand, the price is going to move very rapidly. And, the SEC, NASDAQ uses a few different things when it comes to halting plays. One of the main basis that they use is just when the price spikes, too fast, too soon. In some cases, they use like a 10% band of volatility, or if it moves 5%, moves like 10% just way too quickly, then they halt it. But they also use a different thing where the order books are too thin. And I think that's what was happening here. So just because it's such a low float, there's not that many orders out there within the order book. And so you can see the spread is super wide. Like at some points during this morning spike, like the bid ask was jumping up, multiple dollars per share. And that was just causing it to halt because they want to give market makers time to fill those outstanding orders and make the order book not so thin. So anyways, that's just some background on why things halt sometimes. After this broke out in the morning, I was definitely interested in it. It's like one of the strongest stocks we've seen just here in the small cap market for quite some time. The only level that I really liked personally was just waiting to see, maybe we can get a pullback and just retest that previous resistance in pre-market, just that nice 5-minute pullback. But unfortunately, it did not pull back all the way. Some people have a strategy, buying off VWAP, that's fine. It's not my strategy. And I only want to trade my strategy. So I was looking for that pullback down to that 37.40 area. But as you can see, it was holding in the mid 47s and never pulled back. Made a very nice kind of ABCD setup you could draw out. Nice wedge, nice triangle, whatever you want to call it. But ultimately, I was just waiting for it to pull back. But then, of course, it didn't. And then in the afternoon, I was able to break out over this next resistance at around 66 bucks. So then from there, obviously, it halted into the close. Halts don't happen like in after hours. Like now it's not being halted. But as you can see, it was able to hit a high of 150 bucks. So in just today alone, it went from a low of 23.50 all the way to 150 bucks. That's $125 per share in just one single day. So this does remind me a lot of HKD. And I can't pull up the intraday chart on E-Trade, but if you look back at HKD, it did take, quite a few days to actually reach that $2,500 price. It didn't just do it in one day. In the first few days, you can see if I try to not explode the chart, you can see this first day that it really exploded went from about 70 bucks to 200 bucks. And then the next day after that, it went even further, right? Exploded even further. Because of that, I do think there is definitely a reason to keep this one on watch, right? Don't forget about it. For me personally, the main thing I'm looking at, if you go to the daily chart, you can see this is a very nice daily chart breakout. Use the daily line chart. The previous resistance is right near 58.91. And And also, if you look at the hourly chart, it's right around that same area, right? So for me, the main thing I would, love to buy, it'd be like a gift personally, just seeing that previous resistance retested as new support. Have my max risk probably be break below 50 bucks, just that kind of lower support there. And look for it to swing up into new highs. It's a very low float. There's probably a ton of shorts trapped in this thing. And so it could really have some crazy legs to it for the next few days, as long as it remains bullish. Obviously, there's no guarantee, right? Number one, no guarantee that it's ever going to pull back that far. Number two, no guarantee that even if it does pull back that far, it's going to work. But the risk reward, in my opinion, is very, very, very worth it. So I am definitely interested. I mean, that's probably the most exciting thing we've seen in small caps for quite some time. A lot of people were trying to just look for sympathy plays. Like I was looking at Twitter, and a lot of people were just really trying to pump HKD, saying, oh, well, now that HUDI is running, we should see HKD run in sympathy. But I didn't really buy into that idea. And it's mainly because, number one, we've already seen this do its kind of max move, right? Like we're never going to see HKD do that move again. The share structure is much different. I'm sure they've done just a ton of dilution since then. They've exercised a lot of warrants. And you can just see by the volume, like just in here, there was no new volume whatsoever. So at that point, they probably weren't doing any dilution. And keep in mind, I haven't looked at the filings, but this is just my speculation based off of how the volume is trading. After this second mini spike, you can see ever since then, there's been a pretty good amount of volume traded every single day. So there's a lot of potential bag holders in this thing, right, that are just kind of churning through it. So now, just with any spike that we see in HKD, and you could even see it here, there was one mini spike that happened, but just all it did was just test and reject the previous support level as new resistance. Just ran into that and stopped. So now for HKD, maybe there could be some type of bounce, but I wouldn't expect it to, go massive. At most, all I could really expect it to do is just retest that new level of previous support as new resistance. So that's, what, 30 bucks? Not a bad move, but you're just kind of fighting heavily against the bag holders, and it's just not a good setup. People were also talking about, I think ILAG was one too. This was one of those ones that kind of did a big move. Like not as bad of a chart when it comes to bag holders. But to me, the thing that is so great about HUDI is that we are now in new all-time highs. So, technically, there are no bag holders from here on out. There's only bag holders made from the current price action. Within all of its history, it's in new all-time highs. So there's no limit to how far it can go as long as it keeps on trapping shorts and keeping the trend up. Like I said, what I'm looking for tomorrow is I really want to see it pull back and retest this area between 66 and 58. I'll be waking up very early in pre-market just to see maybe it, does it at like 4 a.m. Who knows? Or it just never does it and I just wait for the next opportunity. Now, the one thing I do remember when it comes to HKD, there were many times where we saw this make a very nice retest of the hourly chart. And I say this all the time where, like, if a stock is truly strong and it's really going to go the distance, it's not just going to have one chance to enter. It's going to have many clean retests of previous resistance as new support. I was looking at the hourly chart on Thinkorswim, like an hour ago on HKD, and it had, I think, 2 or 3 different very clear and obvious retests Yes, they were at higher prices, but it was still very good chart-wise. So even if we don't see this pullback happen down to 58, if it is truly the next kind of supernova, we will probably have at least one chance where there's a nice technical bounce that, you know, we can play. Yeah, that's pretty much it for HUDI. Those are my thoughts about it. And, you know, we'll definitely be looking at this one tomorrow.